Good evening and welcome. I'm Nicola Longford, Executive Director of the 6th Floor Museum at Dealey Plaza, and on behalf of our board and our staff, I'm privileged to present this evening's annual anniversary program in honor of President John F. Kennedy. Each November, we try to showcase a different dimension or angle to the assassination story that has not ever been shared. Many, many times, there are special moments when the past is reconnected in a tangible way to the now, in the ways that are stirring. Until yesterday, some of our guests had not seen each other in 51 years, not since November 1963. This year, we are honored to bring together the 4 remaining photojournalists who worked for the Dallas Times Herald. The Dallas Times Herald ceased to be a newspaper in 1991, and shortly thereafter, the museum, when it was still in its early infancy, was very fortunate to receive its first major photographic donation. This collection consisted of over 700 images, negatives, contact sheets, and prints from the Times Herald's photographic record of the Kennedy assassination from the morning of November the 22nd, 1963 in Fort Worth to the Jack Ruby trial in 1964. The impressive photo mural, which welcomed you upon exiting the elevator this evening, is made up of every one of those 700 images, plus several times over. And it was designed by Brian, who is our graphic designer, so thank him for his marvelous work. In 2014, the museum's collections have grown to hold over 45,000 items: films, photographs, artifacts, historic records, materials, and poignant oral histories. And now, an incredibly generous gesture, former Dallas Times Herald photojournalist Eamon Kennedy, one of tonight's special guests, has donated his collection of approximately 1,200 photographs detailing the weekend of November the 22nd to the museum. Mr. Kennedy, we are so honored to have your work become part of the museum. Please know that these images will be preserved carefully and will become an integral piece of the museum's collection that will benefit students, teachers, researchers, filmmakers, and journalists for decades to come. Thank you so very much. Honestly, this museum could not do its work without people like you, the rest of our speakers, and those of you out there in the audience, you all know who you are, who continue to share, support, attend, participate, give your time and the occasional dollars to help us fulfill our mission in preserving this historic building, the National Historic Landmark Site, making our collections and our resources available to the public, free or at a nominal price. We do this work because we believe in the responsibilities that are being placed on us as cultural stewards of this important history and legacy. And unlike most of our sister non-profit cultural organizations and museums, we do not have their financial support. We do not have any major sponsor, donor, or corporation or governmental entity. And so that's why we rely on your generosity to help us put on these wonderful programs. And this is why this collection donation for Mr. Kennedy, a true treasure trove of images that beautifully complement our existing Dallas Times Herald, Bill Winfrey, and Tom Dillard collections, helps encourage us to continue our cultural critical mission and to provide a forum for dynamic programming, exhibition development, and educational projects. And now I'd like to introduce tonight's moderator, John Sparks. John is an award-winning television producer who has worked in the broadcast industry for over 45 years. Not only has he been a full-time faculty member of the Mayborn School of Journalism at the University of North Texas, he has been a contributing pundit for the Texas Daily on KTXD TV in Dallas, and currently he's the senior editor of the Marist Poll in Poughkeepsie, New York. A personal story about John: on the morning of November the 22nd, 1963, he played the trumpet in the Eastern Hills High School band, welcoming President and Mr. Kennedy, President and Mrs. Kennedy, with Hail to the Chief as they arrived for the Chamber of Commerce breakfast at the Hotel Texas in Fort Worth. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming John Sparks and our panelists.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. The sixth floor is a marvelous organization. They put together programs like this. These things don't just come together automatically. Nicola and her staff, and I wouldn't begin to want to try and name each one of them individually because there's so many of them, I'd leave someone out. But there are a lot of folks behind the scene that made this possible tonight for these guys to all get together, and also to see many of the fine exhibits and collections for researchers, and many of you I think do considerable amount of research. But it's made possible by the hard work that she and her staff do. And having said that, we're going to go back to 1963 tonight. It was a different time, a different era, and we are going to talk about the changes and what it was like, the challenges to cover a presidential visit in 1963. Didn't have cell phones, didn't have digital cameras. Heck, we hardly even had color, guys, did we? Everything was black and white. It was a black and white world, really. I mean, in many ways. I mean, the technology, television was black and white. We only had 4 television stations here in Dallas. No cable, no satellite. When these guys would take their still pictures, I mean, you had to go get them developed, and then you had to pick out the one you're going to do, and it, you wouldn't necessarily get it for hours and sometimes, for the next day's paper, because you had a morning paper, the Dallas Morning News, and then you had what was considered the afternoon paper, the Dallas Times Herald. And so we're going to go back and we're going to revisit the Times Herald, which you're seeing where these guys would check into work. But I want to introduce each one of them. And we're going to talk briefly about how they got into photography and how they got to Dallas. Then we're going to take a chronological trip through that weekend and see some of their work and hear their stories. And then the last 15 minutes, we will have questions. You got a card, I think, when you walked in. If you want to be jotting down your questions, and they'll collect them. And in the last 15 minutes, from 7:45 to 8, they'll collect the cards, and we'll try to address your questions then. And then afterwards, you'll have a chance to meet and talk to these guys. So if we don't get your question answered up here, I think you'll probably find that you'll be able to get an answer from them afterwards. So without further ado, let's, just to my left is Willie Allen. Now, Willie is from Little Rock, Arkansas. Willie, how did you get into photography, and how did you get to Dallas?
Well, let me tell you, the first thing that you all missed if you weren't here earlier was watching all of us try to get up on the stage. It was an event, I tell you. I started with a newspaper in Little Rock called the Arkansas Gazette. I brought the camera. This is the camera that I started with. Now, you all don't know what this is. Neither do I. This is called a speed graphic. You had several steps you had to go through to get the photograph. You had to cock the shutter, you had to focus, and then this little thing held the film. And you got 2 shots. You all have your digital cameras, and you can shoot 100 shots before I can shoot 2. But I think all of us pretty much started with this camera. So just to give you a little bit of a background of how we started in 1963, this is what we started with. You had to be pretty selective with your composition and your shots, because you got 2 quick shots. But I started with the Gazette. I covered the Democratic National Convention in 1960 in Los Angeles when Kennedy was nominated for president. And the United Press wire was how we transferred our photographs to the Gazette. And they hired me and asked me if I'd be interested in going to work. I worked in Austin, traveled with LBJ for 2 years, and then got transferred to Dallas. And that's how I ended up at the Times Herald.
Okay, to your left is the son of John Fitzgerald Kennedy. You think I'm joking? Actually, it's Eamon Kennedy. You just heard he has donated his collection of work to the 6th floor, but I gave him a little tease there, Eamon. Tell us about how John Fitzgerald Kennedy was your old man.
Well, his name was John Fitzgerald Kennedy. I never knew he had a middle name until he died, and I got the death certificate. And And sure enough, it was John Fitzgerald Kennedy. So that was quite a coincidence.
But I detect a little bit of an accent. I want to know how you got into photography, but how you got to Dallas, too, real quickly. Tell us.
Well, I got into photography. First of all, it was a hobby. Growing up in London, and I came to Canada first, and I got into photojournalism there.
Let me back up. He's really from Ireland, but he grew up in London,
Yeah,
and then he's in Canada.
Born in Ireland, and I covered Canadian affairs in Ottawa for 4 years for mostly Time magazine, but sometimes Life, and a bunch of Canadian periodicals. But decided to move out of there because it was so cold. Ottawa is terrible in the winter. It's not that great in the summer. But
shows good mental health to me.
Yeah, headed south, and I was actually passing through Dallas on the way to San Francisco, and I was on a bus, so I got off the bus for a couple of days and visited with the local newspapers and ended up working for the Dallas Times Herald. That was in January of 1962.
Okay, let's go to the next man, Bob Jackson. Now, Eamon came all the way from Ireland, London, Canada. Bob came all the way from Highland Park, right? Right down the street.
And I was another one that turned a hobby into a profession. I don't know why I ever got interested in photography, but at the age of 14, my aunt gave me a 35mm camera, and then I bought a speed graphic and took pictures for the high school yearbook and newspaper. So it was kind of on-the-job training. I did not go to journalism school, something that you almost have to do now. You have to have a photojournalism degree if you want to do anything. I was kind of self-taught, I guess, and I ended up building up kind of a portfolio. I shot a lot of motor racing, sports car racing. That was my big thing, and actually it gave me a lot of training, you know, in shooting action, and then I was lucky to take pictures in the Army, and so I went to work for the Times Herald in September of 1960.
Okay, and to your left is Darryl Heikes, who came from Kansas, right? Darryl, tell us a little bit about how you got into photography and how you got from Kansas to here.
One of my closest friends was Gary Haynes, who was a UPI stringer at the time at Kansas State University. And I got into photography because I wanted to know what I wanted to do with myself. So in high school, and what they had in the high school was a Graflex Super D camera, which was a camera that you looked into the hood. And in the hood, you could see what it was like. You had to cock the shutter. You know, it was just like using a speed graphic in reality. And Gary Haynes says, we ought to just do that and go ahead and work for the newspaper, high school newspaper. So 4 months later, Eisenhower came through Salina on his way to Abilene. So President Eisenhower and his motorcade came through Salina with the high school kids with signs on one side and him driving by. The Graflex Super D gave you one exposure. It was like the dark slide and what have you, but one exposure. You waited until you saw him get close enough, got that hand up to wave, and that's what you did. And that's the only thing that I did, the only picture that I made. But it was in the newspaper, high school yearbook, but it just got me interested in what I was doing, which then later, like everybody, I bought a speed graphic and I bought a Rolleiflex and what it took in order to be into photography. I went to Kansas State University where I photographed all kinds of college events for the college newspaper and for the college yearbook, and I did that for really 5 years and loved every minute of it. But I had no photographic, training. I have a journalism degree, but it did not offer photography, period. And So what I did was just follow my career of what I wanted to do by just learning it myself. And of course I had great mentors, because there were some wonderful photographers in Kansas that I competed with Rich Clarkson from the Topeka Daily Capital, and Bill Sneed, and all kinds of photographers that taught me so much. And that's how I learned photography, was learning from the photographers that I worked with. Well, when I graduated Kansas State in 1960, I was planning on going to Austin, Texas, but as it turned out, I ended up going to Kansas City, Missouri, as a reporter instead of a photographer. And I was in Kansas City, and I had, during high school, had photographed Eisenhower when he came through, as I said. Well, later on, when I was in college, he came to dedicate his library, so I photographed that for UPI. So the next thing I knew, I was covering things for UPI all the time. So that's how I got into photography. And what happened is, when I graduated, had a place to go, and I was sent to Austin, as was Willie, where Willie was. And I was in Austin until the photographer in Dallas was transferred to New Orleans, so I came here to take his place. So I was working, and therefore, at the Times Herald, but it was a situation in which I worked for UPI at the Dallas Times Herald. I worked for the Herald, but I got paid by UPI.
So we got everybody here in Dallas, and it's Thursday, November 21st, 1963, and you know, the president's coming to Dallas, and there's got to be a plan. So what you're looking at right now is what we call the assignment sheet, and you'll see where everybody was supposed to be. And if you've got eyes that are better than mine and can read the thing, you're going to see that old Willie here, he was in Fort Worth at the breakfast. He and I were going to have breakfast with the president. Eamon and Bob were going to be out at Love Field for the arrival of the president, and Bob was going to be in the motorcade, going with the motorcade into downtown Dallas. And Darryl, this is a really interesting note here. I'm fascinated by this note. We're going to get him to explain in a little bit, but if you look down there, you'll see that Darryl's instructions are he's going to be taking a picture of the motorcade. He's to go to downtown Dallas and get a picture of the motorcade. What was the word?
Verilux.
Wide
Yeah,
look.
shoot to be hell, or what?
Yeah, right, yeah.
What does that mean?
Means you got to make whatever frames you can make as good as you can make it, so they can put it on the front page of the paper.
And they thought you were the man.
So I was there, and of course this is the same story. The wide lux that I was using to photograph the Kennedys, when they came around the corner of Main and Harwood, I had seen a woman over there. I had talked to her.
Hey, Darryl, let me interrupt you just for a minute. We're going to see that picture in just a minute, but we're going to strap on our seatbelts here because we got a lot of pictures to go through. When we get to that, I'd like for you to elaborate on that one. But let's start, and let's kind of take it chronologically at the breakfast. And this is outside the Hotel Texas in Fort Worth. There were so many folks that wanted to get in to see the president, and there wasn't enough room. So Jim Wright, former speaker, congressman, still with us, talked the president into coming out on the parking lot for an impromptu event for all the folks that couldn't get into the breakfast. Willie, tell us about that now.
Well, I think Kennedy was probably the first one who really knew how to manipulate the press. Every place we would go, he would have the typewriters set up, not computers, typewriters set up for the reporters, would have food and donuts and drinks and coffee for everybody. We were all in this press room, and we heard that we were going outside. They did have a platform set up. It had been raining all the way to Fort Worth, and was raining pretty hard up until, and people were standing out with raincoats and umbrellas in front of the hotel. And then we found that he was going to go outside. Back in those days, you can see I'm probably 15 feet from the president. Today, you couldn't get within 500 yards of the president.
I remember I could have reached out and touched him that morning.
Yeah,
after the
when
breakfast.
they walked out of the hotel.
Yeah, it was unbelievable.
I was right in front of him. So on this photograph, you see John Connally over the left shoulder of Kennedy, and you see LBJ, of course, to the left, and that was a state senator
Don
named
Kennard.
Yeah,
Don Kennard.
And And then
But he wasn't content just to make a few remarks. He had to press the flesh out there. I think there you go.
and you can see the huge crowds in Fort Worth that morning. And he just walked right out in the crowds and would shake hands. And Secret Service were concerned, but not too much. This was one of my favorite photographs. Everybody wanted to touch the president. Everybody wanted to be close to him. And he's going back into the hotel here.
And back inside the hotel, of course, Jackie was late to the breakfast, as I recall, but you got your pictures in. I guess this is probably before the program began.
Yeah, that was when they first came in and sat down, and I had to wait for Jackie to come in so I could get a photograph. Then I was supposed to come back to Dallas and process the film for early editions of the paper.
Okay, and speaking of early editions of the paper, we talked about how the morning news had already come out that morning. There's a whole other story about the morning news that morning, and an ad that appeared in the morning news. But what we're looking at here is the first edition of the Herald that day, and you'll see some of your photography up there. The guys on horseback were outside the hotel, and then there's the president making a speech. There's the breakfast, the shot we just saw, and I think the ones on the left are from San Antonio and Houston, the first leg of the trip. But meanwhile, Eamon, you and Bob are out at Love Field. Let's tell us about these folks out here with the Confederate flags and all. Both of you just chirping. What was it like being out there? Did they herd you into one place, keep you confined? What?
No, they let us. They gave us some freedom. We were on the other side of the fence that was keeping the people back, but. The day looked like it was going to be raining, which is a huge problem, because there would be very, very limited chance to make pictures because they would have whisked him out and just put him in the car. But as Air Force One came in, the sun came out, and he spent quite a bit of time diving into the crowds.
Well, let's, Bob Jackson, I think this is your picture, if I'm not mistaken. Tell me about it, and tell me about, was this the first time that you'd seen the president?
No, I had photographed the president on 2 other occasions. When he came to Dallas to visit Sam Rayburn, who was in the hospital, Speaker of the House, and I photographed him then, and then I covered the graveside ceremony of Rayburn's, and had a chance to shoot him there. But like Eamon said, they went over, he decided to go over to the fence and shake hands, greet the people. And so that gave us a photo op there.
And Eamon, I think you had this next one coming up, you had a vantage point where you got to watch. I think you shot this one, if or at least I was told you did. I don't know if, long time, but.
I believe so, but.
It's either you or John, because I didn't do it.
It's either myself or
I
John
didn't shoot
Mazziola.
it, so it must have been you.
It's probably me. It's hard to remember all the stuff that happened so long ago, but I did shoot a lot of pictures of him in the crowd.
Yeah,
that's definitely one of mine.
Yeah, that's not. Did either you guys? The crowds were. I've seen the video. They're mobbing them. Did either one of you worry or think about security? Did it even cross your mind that anything like what we were to see later, when just within an hour, was going to really happen?
I think it's always if you cover these things, it's always in the back of your mind.
Bob?
Well, I agree with that. I mean, it's always back there somewhere, but I don't think in this situation we really worried about it. There were people in the crowd with "Let's bury King John." And Barry was spelled B-A-R-R-Y, Barry Goldwater. And there were a few people in the crowd with those signs, but they certainly were not a danger.
Okay.
But 95% of the crowd were enthusiastic and happy to see the president.
So they got to see the president, and some of them, got to shake his hand. The next thing you know, the motorcade's pulling out, and Bob, you're in that motorcade. Tell us about what it's like to be in a motorcade. What kind of pictures you get in a motorcade?
It was kind of boring, really. I mean, you can't shoot the motorcade if you're in it. And so I'm just, and the paper had already assigned me, had told me to hand my film out. Well, I'll get to that point.
Yeah.
But and this made a nice picture because it had the railroad track in it and the cop standing up there, And really the only thing to shoot along the route were the crowds on each side, or I was able to get a picture when we were on Turtle Creek and the motorcade made a curve, so I could get a shot there. And then as we went through downtown Dallas, I shot a nice crowd shot. I think it'll
we'll
be
see
on the
that in a
screen.
minute.
Yeah.
But so you can shoot the crowd, but meanwhile, down at Main and Harvard is Mr. Shoot to Beat Hell, Darryl Heikes. So tell Darryl, here's your shot, by the way. So
Yeah.
why don't you talk about you? I interrupted you before, but have at it there. You mentioned the woman in the sign, and what were your challenges?
Well, I saw her standing there before they got there, and I just told her to be sure and hold the sign up because I wanted it to be in the photograph when I made it. Plus, also in those days, you didn't have to worry about, quote, being on the curb. So I got as close as I possibly could with the Widelux camera to get to the car, which I was able to do, and saw Clint Hill in the back in the bumped seat and them waving to me facing this way.
And now how did you're not going to have a whole lot of shots. I don't guess you have a motor drive. I
made one frame.
Yeah, the guys that you work for you're the money shot guy, and you got to make sure that they're looking your way. You just gut feeling, you know when it's going to happen, or did you wave back at them, or what?
You just wait until it happens, and it's got to happen sometime, and if it doesn't, you're in a lot of trouble.
Well, you didn't get in a lot of trouble that day because you got a pretty good shot, but I'll tell you somebody did get in trouble was a motorcycle cop. He ran over somebody's foot, didn't he? In this one of your pictures here?
Yeah, the cop ran over the foot, which slowed everything down, which slowed me down as far as trying to follow the motorcade as much as I could. Because it was only like 5 blocks to the paper. From Main and Harwood at the most, I think it was 5 blocks. So I was running along behind the cars as fast as I could to try to get to the paper because it was going to be the picture that was supposedly going to be on the front page.
Well, meanwhile, while you're running, old Bob's, he's riding, and he's got this shot here of some of the folks. But they didn't just depend on you, Bob. I had the late Bill Beal, and he was, I think, up at a higher vantage point. In fact, is Bill Beal's
that's
picture.
Probably Bill's.
And
that crowd picture.
Yeah,
they'd already
back up to
waved
the
at the
crowd.
president, but it looks like they're waving at us. Yeah, I mean, we're sitting up on the back seat of a convertible, like the prom queen or whatever, and they're all waving at us, and they had no reason to do that, but it made a nice picture.
Yeah, and so you're you get the nice pictures there. Bill Beal gets the overview. In fact, I think he's got another one coming up. That's a nice shot. It looks almost like a ticker tape thing. Now we got another treat for you folks. The next picture. This is Bob Jackson in the motorcade.
That was last week. You notice a cigarette in my hand?
Yeah, and
I quit that year.
Well, you weathered the years quite well, Bob. Now, to your immediate left in the picture is Jimmy Darnell from Channel 5, right?
Right.
And then up in the upper left is Tom Diller of the Morning News. You're not exactly competing against Jimmy and the boys at the TV stations, but Tom Diller, he gets paid to beat you. You get paid to beat him. Tell us about that rapport, and some of the other guys. You're going to jump in about the competition.
Well, it looks in this picture. It looks like Dillard's standing up. I know that they switched positions because when we first heard the shots, Dillard was sitting next to me, where Darnell is there.
Mm-hmm.
But my assignment, shall I talk about that as far as emptying the camera?
Yeah, real quickly. We need to.
Well, I was to empty my cameras and pass my film out at the corner of Main and Houston, where we had Jim Featherston, reporter, waiting. And I put the film in an envelope, and so I was to give it to him as we rounded the corner.
And let's go to this next shot for just a minute here, because what it illustrates is that, when what happened, nobody got a picture of it except Bob. You're trying to get this film off, and you see something as they turn there off onto Houston, do you not?
Well, as we made the turn, I tossed my envelope out, and the wind caught it, and Featherston had to chase the envelope, and we were laughing. And by then, by the time he got to the envelope, we had rounded the corner, and we were facing the book depository, and we heard a shot, a rifle shot. And then there was a pause and two more shots closer together. And of course the sound came from right in front of me, and I just looked up, and there was, on the 6th floor, was a rifle resting on the window ledge. I could see the barrel and part of the stock, but it was just instant. He drew it in. And I'm trying to balance a camera without film, and that particular camera, the back comes off. You know, you have to take the back off, put the film in, put the back on. So there's two parts there in my lap I'm trying to balance, you know, and so I use that as an excuse for not getting a picture. I don't think I could have reacted, even if the camera had been loaded and I saw the rifle. I don't think I could have swung it up, focused fast enough. But I said, "There's a rifle," and Tom Dillard said, "Where?" And I pointed out the window, and he photographed the empty window.
So what do you, we've seen the footage, a lot of you all have seen the footage of Dealey Plaza and people running, and you see the Newmans, you know, trying to cover their kids there on the knoll. Tell us a little bit about what you saw, and did you get any, you know, were you able to get any pictures? What went through your mind? You knew something was going on, but...
Well, something like this had never happened to me before. I mean, I didn't know whether to get out of the car. The other people in the car wanted to get out.
Yeah.
So when we reached the next intersection, which is where the motorcade had made a left turn, the driver stopped and they got out.
Yeah.
And I kind of surveyed the scene there real quickly, and I could see the Newmans covering up their child, and people running, and a motorcycle policeman rode his motorcycle up the grassy knoll, jumped off, let the bike keep going till it fell over. He went to the front door of the book depository, and another policeman joined him and went in. So my thought was, there's really nothing to photograph here. My job is to be with the president. Whoever's in that building shooting at the president's not going to probably get out alive. It's certainly they're not going to march him out for us to photograph. You know, that was what ran through my mind. So I decided to stay in the car, and then, which was not a wise thing to, well, would have been the wise thing to do. So by then we're going down the road past the grassy knoll. I see all this, the look of horror on people's faces, and I asked the driver to let me out. Well, by then we were under the underpass, on the other side of the underpass. I decided to go back. That was my mistake. But anyway, he let me out, and I ran back up to the grassy knoll, and not really thinking about taking pictures initially, just finding out, you know, immediately I found out from what people said that it was very bad. The president had been hit.
Okay. Well, now,
And that, you know, then I knew I'd made a boo-boo.
well, you make up for it later. Okay. But okay, so you're right in the middle of it. You know something's going on. Let's bring in your compadres. Eamon, you've been out at Love Field. You were supposed to wait at Love Field for them to come back, the departure, I believe. Darryl, you were heading back to the paper, I guess, to get that money shot into the soup. And Willie, last time we checked with you, you're in Fort Worth. So how did the other three guys get word that something had happened? And when did you learn the president was shot? And did somebody tell you where to go? Or how did you end up getting to where you ended up? This next shot here, you're going to see Parkland, I think. And I know that Bob just said he got out to Parkland, but I think, Eamon, you were already at Parkland by then, weren't you?
I was, yeah. I was working with a reporter, Bob Fenley, and our job was to wait till he came back and photograph him again. So we decided to maybe get some lunch at the airport, and we just sat down. We're going to order something, and the waitress told us the president had been shot. So Bob found the phone and confirmed it, and we made great time to Parkland, and there was a lot of people milling around out there already, but the police kept us back a little bit. We were in close to begin with, and then they moved us back, and we didn't really have the long lenses to cover being back that far. So, but I did get pictures of Jackie coming out. And,
this next shot shows Lennon Johnson outside Parkland. Is that one of yours?
I think it is.
Yeah. And did you know then? The next? Let's go to the next slide here. We see Malcolm Kilduff, who's the President Kennedy's, I guess, the assistant press secretary, because Pierre Salinger was press secretary. He was on a plane going to Europe or somewhere. But anyway, this is the announcement that Kilduff made that the president was mortally wounded, that he had died. So, Eamon, you're there. Darryl, where were you? What after you got to the paper? What did you do? You gave him your money shot, but then what did you do?
When I found out that the president had been shot from the school book depository, I dumped all my stuff, grabbed all new camera equipment, long lenses, film, and I ran to the book depository. And I got across from the book depository, and there were cops all around the place and looking up, and I looked up at the window, and I didn't see anything going on. I just went straight along because there were a bunch of reporters in front of the...
Okay, so you're at the depository, but so we're going to pick up that part in just a minute. But out at Parkland, Bob, you're at Parkland. You picked up some of the shots, but this young lady here, Eamon, this young lady is Kathy Atkinson. That's one that you took a picture of. That kind of became took on a little notoriety, did it not?
It did. It ran. It was cropped differently than this, but it ran all over the world, I believe.
There's of course, the Dallas Times Herald version of it.
And when I shot it, I didn't get her name. I was too busy there was a whole bunch of other pictures there, and there was nothing else to shoot except the reaction of people at that
we saw
time.
why Bob Jackson looked back in the day. You were kind of a handsome devil yourself, weren't you? There you are.
Yes, I was, yeah.
Now, who shot that? Of you and Kathy? That was obviously after the fact.
I think it was Andy Hansen, but I'm not
Okay,
sure.
all right.
And we didn't find out who the girl was until a couple of days later. She came in with her mother to the newspaper after seeing a picture on the front page. So
when was that one taken? What year? Several years.
No, that was taken within a few days.
Okay.
Within a week, maybe.
So okay.
Okay, let's move the story on. The hearse leaves Parkland Hospital. One of you guys got this shot. I'm not sure who. Anybody remember if you got?
It wasn't mine, but I did.
I did get some shots of the hearse.
But now we left old Darryl down there at the depository, and I think Willie's going to show up at the depository in a minute. But Darryl, you were starting to talk here about the depository, but then you go over to the sheriff's office and you hear some radio traffic about Oak Cliff, don't you? Tell us.
Tempo Bowley got onto Tippett's radio and said a cop had been shot in Oak Cliff. And I grabbed a reporter and I said, let's go, because I don't ever remember a cop ever being killed in Oak Cliff prior to that. Mm-hmm. So I got the gear and we went, and here they were going over Tippett's car.
Now, did you think there was a connection between that and the shooting of the president?
Sure.
Okay. And there's another picture here, I think. Here we're on it now, yeah. In fact. So you were one of the only, maybe the only still guy out there, as I recall.
I was the only one that went. I couldn't figure out why nobody else wanted to go, but they didn't. But that's up to them. The only person that I saw there were a couple of TV crews, and there was the cop shop, forensic photographer, and that was it.
Now let's see the next picture just for a minute, and I'm just curious if anybody in the crowd can guess which one of these guys this is. This is our friend Willie here, who'd been over in Fort Worth at the breakfast. Willie, why don't you pick it up? And you've been in Fort Worth, and you're heading back to Big D to get your stuff back. What happens to you? I mean,
well, my assignment was to get back to the paper and process the film for early editions, and so I drove back and I processed the film, and I was supposed to go to the trademark for his noon speech.
Right.
And so I'm walking out the door, and the city editor yells, "Get down to the triple underpass, there's been a homicide." Now, this whole area was mostly deserted old buildings and run down, and so my first thought was, well, some transient's been murdered, or there's been just a murder there. And just as the elevator doors open, the city editor says the president's been shot. So I hop on the elevator, and our office was only 3 blocks away, so I run down, and
This is some of your stuff there outside
Right.
the depositories, I think.
right, and I run into the building. The entrance at that time was over on Elm Street, and I ran into the building, and the sheriff and the police were there interviewing all the employees and asking them to leave. So I got in the front door, and then they asked me to leave. And this photograph is.
These are the famous 3 tramps, are they not?
These are the tramps that they were. It was one of those moments where we felt like we had to document everything because we knew it was historic, obviously. So I look up, and here the police are escorting these 3 guys across the street, and I got 3 or 4 shots of them. They took them into the county courthouse, and of course they wouldn't let me go in because they took them into the jail. And I don't think they fingerprinted them. I don't think they knew who they were. And for the next 20 years, an FBI agent spent his life finding out who they were, and he discovered who they were.
Yeah. That's another story. Now, you talked about documenting everything. This is up here on the 6th floor. You took this picture. You're up inside the building now when they find the rifle. But this picture here, I've been told that the boxes had been moved. There's a hammer over there on the windowsill. Was this a kind of a setup shot or what?
Well, obviously, you all have seen the setup upstairs on the 6th floor. It looked exactly like that. The floor was pretty much empty. If you've been in an old building where they spread that red stuff on the floor to sweep it with, the floor had a distinct odor to it. And we got off the freight elevator, and they had a few of those. You know what a pallet looks like. And apparently Oswald had taken the rifle and kind of thrown it up underneath one of those pallets is where they found it. And I think there were 3 of us
And
there.
here's Carl Day with the rifle,
Right,
I think.
right. And he had the boxes stacked up to hide anybody seeing him if they got off on the 6th floor. And then that was the scene.
Hey, Willie, I got a question for you. There's a Channel A photographer, Ron Ryland, that was up there. He shot, or maybe it was Tom Ollier. But at any rate, they shot the footage, and the story was they couldn't get they wouldn't let you guys out. He had to, he had to throw the spool of film down out the window to get it back to the station. Is that right? Did they keep you guys up in there?
No, I didn't throw any film out the window.
Not you, but did they keep you locked up in there for a while?
No, I don't remember that. We were there for a few minutes, and of course, obviously, I wanted to get it back to the lab to Andy Hansen, who was doing the darkroom work at that time.
Because the deadlines are coming, and here is the Times Herald, which, obviously beat the morning news about getting the word out, I guess. The morning news had an extra edition also, I guess, but you guys probably had the first paper, didn't you? And,
yeah, I think so.
Darryl, your shot around that corner didn't make it, did it?
Nope.
Now, strangely enough, that picture,
Yeah?
I took that picture, but they gave Willie the credit for it.
Well, they knew that would do a better job, so.
It's an interesting story. I think Ronald Reagan is being given credit for a quote that says it doesn't matter if we didn't worry about who got the credit, no telling what we could do. But it turns out that Harry Truman was really the guy that said it, and Reagan took his quote. Let's go. I think that's the Times Herald newsroom. What was it like in there when you guys got back to the newsroom there? Everybody just jump in. Tell us a little bit about it. I think Andy Hansen took this picture, and it was on the afternoon of November 22nd.
I think all of us, when we went back, there was a lot of emotion because, again, it was a historic day, obviously, and we didn't know what would come next. Everybody was saying, "What do we think is going to happen?" And would LBJ be shot? And would there, be any more assassinations or anything like that? So there's a lot of confusion.
And this is Felix McKnight, the editor.
Yeah,
here.
right.
I wasn't there when that was happening. I'd gone back out to Love Field.
Okay.
When
That was when they were wanting you to.
cameras loaded with color
Yeah.
to get the swearing in, but they wouldn't let me on board.
Yeah. Eamon, I think it's National Geographic or somebody. Anyway, Eamon had color, and so they're trying to get him on board that plane to get that photograph of Johnson being sworn in, which you weren't able to get. Now, Felix McKnight, the editor, wrote a letter to his staff, basically, thanking them for the job that they had done there. That's a copy of the letter. But meanwhile, Darryl, you didn't make the paper, but you're up at the cop shop now. You're up at the police station, and they brought in this guy that shot Tippett, and here he is, and that's your shot there, I think. Tell us about, is that some kind of communist sign he's given there, or what?
He's trying to show that they roughed him up at the theater and gave him a black eye.
Uh-huh.
He said, and he was saying, look what they did to me.
Now, I've seen virtually the same picture, but it wasn't your picture there. You got a big shoulder in your picture. It's starting to get crowded up there, wasn't it?
Right.
Was that a problem? I know that if you look at the video, they got, the foreign press, you got everybody and their dog down there, and finally they tried to accommodate you that night around midnight, did they? And who all was there when they paraded Oswald down there?
I was there.
We were all there.
Everybody was there.
Yeah.
I think.
Tell us a little bit about what that was all about.
From my point of view, looking back on it now, you laugh at the size of the video cameras and the still cameras and the how antiquated they are, but it was so crowded, and you're pushing and trying to get up in front. Somebody's standing up in front of you, and you're pushing them down.
Okay, and there's another shot from that same media showing there, and it wasn't there for very long, but I think the police wanted to show that he was. They were taking good care of him, I guess, was the whole purpose of that deal. Now, the next shot we got here, Bob,
Yeah.
I think you shot that, did you not?
I did.
And when and where was this?
I don't remember exactly, but it's kind of in the middle of the night, early morning, maybe Saturday morning.
Okay. Now, the next shot everybody has seen. We're going to see it. Bob, this is your picture that won a Pulitzer Prize of Jack Ruby shooting Lee Harvey Oswald. Now, the man that made Bob famous is here with us on the front row, Jim Lavelle, the man in the white hat. And
It's that young guy on the front
yeah,
row.
the young guy. Yeah. But
The only reason I came tonight, I want to find out who shot Kennedy.
well, we'll see if we can't get that answer. Somebody has got the answer. That card you got there, pass it down the aisle there. Okay, so Bob, take us through this. Basically, you got Oswald's going to be transferred on a Sunday morning from the city jail down to the west end of town where the county jail is, and so we got to make plans to do it. So Bob and Eamon, you hop in on this too, because both you guys were involved in this deal.
We were. I was down at the county jail.
Okay, you were at the west end, and you're Bob.
I was there.
Now you've got the same challenge that Darryl had. You got to get that money shot, and so you got a lot of people down there. It's crowded. You got a strobe that doesn't recycle but every 6 seconds after you shoot it.
Yeah, 5 or 6.
And so you're going to have probably one good one. But tell us how you decide where to be and when to shoot. And
Okay, we real quick, I had a twofold assignment. Bob Finley was a reporter, and we were told to get this picture of Oswald being transferred and then go out to Parkland Hospital where Nellie Connolly, the governor's wife, is having a press conference. And if I'm not mistaken, they were supposed to move Oswald around 9:30 or so, and I think the press conference was at 10:30, and so it was going to be tight. So we're down in the basement, and we were looking at our watches, and I said, Finley, go inside, call the city desk, tell them we're not going to be able to get to Parkland Hospital in time. He did, and the person who was on the city desk, who will remain nameless, said, well, you go back and tell Jackson that if you don't get that shot of Oswald and can't get out to Parkland in time, then just blow that off, because we have Eamon down at the county jail and he'll get a picture of Oswald when they bring him in. And so he came back, told me that. I said, no way, I'm not going to leave here, because, well, that would have been foolish, you know. And so Willie Allen, I think, ended up going to Parkland Hospital for the press conference.
And we'll go down there in just a minute. But now, so Ruby shoots Oswald. This is what the paper looks like. The Dallas Morning News, most of you know the classic story, Jack Beers thought he had the money shot. And so on Monday morning's paper, the whole front page of the paper has a millisecond before Bob shot. I mean, you see Ruby with his hand out there, but you know, you don't get the anguish, you don't get the shot. I mean, you were
A puff of smoke.
skill, dumb luck, and by the way, what we're talking
A little
about,
of both.
and then what we're talking about, Eamon, I think we were talking beforehand. You were supposed to be at this end and Bob at the other end, or how'd that?
Well, we decided the night before that to which end to take.
Okay.
And,
I just want to point out one quick thing.
Sure.
The reason that Jim over here was handcuffed to Oswald was his prisoner,
Right.
because of the shooting of Tippit, not Kennedy, right?
It's a state.
Because that was, he
Right.
covered the Tippit shooting. I mean,
Right.
so he was his prisoner.
Yeah, and actually,
So now-
Jim interviewed a Tippit before Will Fritz got in on the act. Jim was the first one to interrogate Oswald. So, absolutely. Now, okay, so you got that one shot, but now, yeah. Okay, now here we see Oswald on the stretcher. Now, I believe, if I remember correct, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jim or Bob, but they brought him back inside for a minute because they had that ambulance had to back down there, did they not?
They had to bring the ambulance in, yes.
Right.
And then they wheeled him out, and I just held my camera up to get that shot.
Okay.
That's just part of the negative, really.
Okay.
It's cropped in.
All right, so you had to, and you also had that problem with that strobe. You had to make sure that you got what you did. Meanwhile, you know, there's a lot of hoopla going on down at your end, Eamon. These are the folks down there with Sheriff Decker waiting to, and they get the word that Oswald's been shot, and
there was a lot of celebrating when that word was put out for some reason. But,
yeah, and then you know, so Jim rides in the hospital out to Parkland in the ambulance with Oswald, and after he's pronounced dead. This picture was taken right after 107 when he was pronounced dead. And then later that night, I believe the next picture here we'll see was taken late that night at police headquarters. They had a moment of silence for not only the president but
I think I did that one.
did you do that one? With Officer Tippit. And then Sunday morning, I think we start seeing the flowers show up at Dealey Plaza. I'm not sure who took this one. Did Bob? Was that you? I mean, you.
No, that was Sunday morning. No, I was. At
You're
I
up.
think
You're
that's
yeah.
what I
Obviously, yeah.
I think I did
obviously.
that one.
Okay, that's you,
I've
Willie.
did that a bunch of times, yeah.
Okay, and I think there's a second one there
Yeah.
that, and they're just starting to come because as you may remember, there were a whole lot more arrangements that started showing up there. But meanwhile, Monday, of course, they buried the president in Arlington National Cemetery. But in Rose Hill in Fort Worth is this shot, and in this shot you see on the far left you see the oldest Oswald daughter and Marina, and then that's Robert Oswald, Lee's brother, and then Lee's mother Marguerite holding the younger one there. And who shot that? Would one of you guys shoot that one? Do you remember? Were any of you at Rose Hill?
No.
Dallas News guy shot that probably.
Dallas News. I know that Paul Grudy, the Undertaker, they recruited recruited news photographers and reporters to be pallbearers there. There wasn't. I mean, this was the crowd other than the press. And then the last
Well,
picture.
the story was that they were afraid that somebody would dig up the grave and.
Oh yeah,
So,
I
I
knew
don't
Paul
think-
Grudy. There's a lot of stories on
Yeah.
that deal. In fact, that's why you had the 4th policeman guarding here, and then they guarded it for months around the clock there at Rose Hill. But now I hope many of you have written some questions down here, and maybe we can, if we've got any of them here, maybe we can have a chance to answer. We're running a hair long, maybe, but we'd like to have any. If any of you bothered to fill out, we'd like to get those answered for you. And while we're waiting here, I'm sure you got some stories that we didn't talk about. Anything? Anybody want to jump in and talk a little bit about what it was like? Did you guys have a chance to decompress after all this? I mean, you were certainly affected at some point in time after.
I think it took a matter of a couple of weeks before we really had time to sit down and think about the magnitude of it. I don't know. I wasn't right away that we had any time because we were so busy.
Yeah.
You know, it's got to be, if not the most historical or biggest story that you were ever involved with, or one of them. I know, Darryl, you've shot a lot of presidents' pictures in in Washington in years past, but for each one of you, was this the biggest thing, looking back on your career, that you were ever involved with?
Without a doubt.
By far.
Yeah, by far.
Yeah, we all feel that way.
I think that the interesting thing that over the past 50 years, there seems to be a lot more interest now in the assassination than there was 10 years, 15 years afterward. And the interesting thing to me is that every single person that was old enough to know what had happened, remember where they were and what they were doing. It made such an imprint. And everybody has their own story that connects them to the assassination.
Sure.
Even today, 51 years later.
I think it started maybe in the 20th or 25th anniversary,
Yeah.
and then since then it's gotten more interest.
You know, as the years went by, but even as the months went by, let's talk about this one, because if it's not on one of these cards, I know it's going to come up, and that is, what do each one of you think about a conspiracy? Was it a conspiracy? And let's just go right down Willie?
Well, I covered when the Cuban freedom fighters came back. I covered them in Corpus Christi, and I met one of the guys, a guy named Manuel Penabaz. The Cuban fighters were really upset with Kennedy, so that could have been a possibility. And of course, the New Orleans connection with the mafia, that could have been a connection. But from everything I've read, everything I understand, I think Oswald acted alone. His fingerprints were all over the rifle. His chick print was on it. The bottle. Obviously, he fired 3 times from the window. So I think he acted alone.
What do you think, Eamon?
I don't believe it was a conspiracy. I think Oswald fired those 3 shots. One of them missed, but
Yeah.
And it's as simple as that. I know a lot of people have written books claiming that the bullet went in 10 different directions, but I accept the Warren Commission's.
You accept Warren. Bob,
Yeah.
do you accept Warren? The Warren Commission?
Yeah, I agree with both of these guys here. I think after 50 years, somebody would have spilled the beans if there was a conspiracy. Somebody on their deathbed or somebody would have let it out.
So Darryl, lone gunman?
No, I agree the same thing. I think that Oswald did it. I don't think that anybody else was involved in the shooting part of it at all.
Okay. But then you say the shooting part. I think somebody thought, they wondered about how he got the money to go to Mexico and New Orleans and all over creation. So do you think maybe there was, while he did the shooting, do you think there were other people involved and he was a part of?
I don't think so.
You
But
don't. Anybody
I always
else?
had an
don't
open mind to that, but nobody's ever proven it, and by now I think somebody would have.
And remember, Oswald was a trained sharpshooter, sniper for the
Yeah.
U.S. Marines.
Yeah.
So this was something he was trained to do.
We got some questions, and a lot of the questions revolve around, photography. How many film slides did you carry, or film packs?
It was 35 millimeter film.
35 millimeters, a little spools, 35 millimeters.
36 exposures.
36 exposures.
All
So
black and white.
36 exposure load is what you
Yeah.
had there. Okay.
Mostly
Tri-X, plus X?
Tri-X, all Tri-X.
So that's what, 400 ASA?
Right.
Okay, all right.
We used different cameras. Some had Canons. I had a Nikon, and I also had a Canon and a Leica. I think Eamon had Canons.
The Canon
Yeah.
and the Nikon.
Bob, what did you shoot with?
Nikon and Nikon and Rolleiflex.
Darryl, same?
I did the same. I used Nikon and Rolleiflex.
Okay, now here's one. How did you move about the city so quickly? Taxi, private car? Bob, you talked about how you hitched a ride with a lady to get out to Parkland, right?
Right.
But Darryl, did you drive your own car?
No, I rode to the Tippett scene, and then we went to the Texas Theater, and then we went to Cop Shop with a reporter.
Who had a car?
Yeah, who had a car? It was parked in the sheriff's office. I mean, parking lot in the basement of the county courthouse when it all went down.
And Eamon and Willie, were you in your own car?
I basically stayed here because the office was only 3 blocks up the street, so I didn't leave the school book depository until they took Oswald in, and of course we all went to the city hall after that.
Did you drive your own car to Fort Worth for the breakfast?
Yeah, oh yeah.
And Eamon, your own car
I
out to...
drove to Love Field.
Yeah.
Now you must have hitched a ride because you're in the
I rode to Love
motorcade.
Field with Mazziota. Okay. And he took the film back.
Yeah.
Okay, and then and then your
and I
job,
got the
you're in the motorcade, and then now the car in the motorcade, whose car was that? And was that...
Well, I don't know who owned it, but the drivers of those convertibles were Texas Rangers.
Okay, all right, okay. Someone wants to know, each of you, your favorite photo, most iconic, and why. I would presume, Bob, that there's no doubt.
I'd have to pick that, yeah.
Yeah, we all deserve the Pulitzer Prize. He didn't deserve it.
Darryl, what about your iconic photo or definitive photo? Would it be the one where he turns the corner there, or?
As far as the assassination,
Yeah.
I think it would probably be the car turning the corner, but also it would be Oswald, coming into Will Fritz's office for the first time.
Oh, okay. Oh, with the handcuffs. Okay.
Yeah, with the handcuffs, yeah.
All right. Eamon, would it be Kathy Atkinson or?
Well,
pretty neat
yeah,
photograph.
that was a good one. There was also right before Kennedy got in the limo at Love Field, I'd managed to get around in front of him, and he was moving towards me. And when he got to the right distance, I said, "Hold it," and he did stop. And I got a really nice close-up portrait. And that was an interesting shot.
Willie, how about you?
Obviously, the arresting of the transients.
Okay.
Because that was they reopened the hearing in '79 because of that photograph, so that was pretty iconic. And looking out the window, it was in every book and magazine in the world. So those two probably.
That's great. What a pleasure to sit with all 4 of you guys, to hear your stories, to hear your answers to your questions. Again, before we move on, I want to again thank Nicola and Megan and Stephen Fagan who worked our slides and organized all the pictures you watch. Ani Simmons, Brenda Kelly, Kara Fordyce, Gary Mack, and if I left anybody out, I apologize. But the Sixth Floor did a marvelous job of bringing you guys together, and we're going to adjourn, have a little reception here, and you'll have a chance to ask your questions with these guys and get the answers that maybe there's something we didn't get a chance to talk about. We talk all night. We talked last night, the 4 of us, and they got some great stories. And again, thank you guys for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you all.